Hello, today I'm playing with these little wildflowers, and I'm going to also be playing with some values, light and darks of colors, and I thought it would be kind of fun to share with you. So I want to show you that. Hold on. So here's a perfect example. I make these for most of my paintings of light and dark values. So here's the dark value of a color. Or darker. This one isn't real dark. I just happen to have this sitting here. Let me see if I can get that a little darker. So this would be a dark value. And as I moved to the right, I added more and more water and it gets lighter and lighter. So I do that with all of my colors, and it just creates so much depth and so much dimension in your paintings. And you can do this with glazes too. So that's what I'm kind of playing with today as I was sitting here. I wanted to do these little wildflowers. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that today. My little daisies here, I'm getting those. I should have brought some in from my garden. I've got these all outside happening and they're just so cute. So they are like a white color, but I'm going to use some gray, some yellow ochre, some of those, maybe some brown sepias. And I'm working with my Artisto paper. You know how much I love this. Like, look at even the cover is gorgeous. So that's what I'm using today. That's kind of my standard. This is my spring one. So I've labeled it spring, and such a great paper for beginners. Also the Meeden, if you really, really want 100% cotton. But I think this is just fabulous. And I'm going to be using my 6 long round. These are pretty much my two go-tos, the 8 Velvetouch Princeton round and then my 6 long round, because that 6 just gives me a tiny bit of an ability for some detail if I want to get into some small areas. And then, of course, I'll be using my Lang palette, which I just refilled, so I'm pretty happy about that. I actually use the tubes to refill these. So they're all pretty full. There's a few here, my olive green, I need to put a little bit more in, but look at all the fabulous colors. When you're a beginner, I mean, unless you really enjoy that, and a lot of people do, I didn't. It was a little overwhelming for me to, when I started years and years and years and years ago, to create different colors. So this palette is fabulous. I can just pull it out and I pretty much have any color I might be looking for, from light greens to dark greens, browns, all these different oranges. They have really gorgeous and just wonderful pinks and purples. So I love their palette. And then of course I've got my wash and rinse container here. Important to have a wash container for your brush after you're done using your water, and then a rinse. And to make sure you got all that paint off so it doesn't go into your next color you start using, I just rinse it and dab it off to make sure it's clear. All right, so let's get started here. I'm going to put in my palette here. I've actually already got some, and that is a yellow ochre. And then I just added the tiniest bit of, and interesting, I don't usually use this color, but I think in the My Lang palette, it's called Coal Black. So it's a good kind of, for whites, it's a nice kind of shadowy color, because white is never just white. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush, and I'm using a pretty light value. So just lay down a tiny bit, because this is really meant to be the shadow. Oops, sorry about that. I just zoomed in way too much. So I'll zoom into that flower there. And I'm just creating the tiniest bit of shadow. I'm even going to add a little more water to that. You want a really light value, so probably 80% water, 20% pigment. And then tapping off on the side to get rid of that extra paint, anchoring my hand. And I'm going to go around and just kind of add some grays here. You could even have a little bit more blue in this. There we go. I love this 6 round, I'm really finding I'm using it an awful lot. Maybe shadow the back petals that are tucked in or a little bit more. Now I'm going to wash and rinse my brush and kind of soften some of those lines. Just like that. Now when this dries, it will be lighter. So now I'm going to go into a little bit of maybe some yellow ochre for the middle. So let me get that here. Let's see. I'm going to, well, let's put it right here. Oh, that had some white in it. Don't want to use that. Hold on a second, guys. Let me grab my little palette here. I need to wash my palette out. And I keep forgetting every time I start to paint. So there's some yellow ochre. And I'm going to make it really watery because yellow ochre can be quite bright. So I've really got that watered down. And then what I'll do is just kind of go in and tap in here and there. Water it down and put, I want an even lighter value than that. So I am constantly tapping my paper towel. I do that a lot, I noticed. It's kind of just habit, I suppose, but it does serve a purpose. So I'm just kind of spreading some of that yellow around. There we go. And it's got that wash of gray underneath it, so I think that's nice. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let that sit just a minute. Maybe add, I picked up a tiny bit of my sienna in the Mylang palette, and I'm just going to barely tap in, just on the corner, and then I'll let that kind of spread around. And move to my little, we've got these little blue purpley things. So I'm going to do those. And I'll start with kind of a light wash. So I don't even know if you can see this. It's very light. But we can always build layers, and that's typically how I work with my watercolors, is just applying of, oops, sorry. That's why I typically use a short brush, because I tend to knock my camera if I have a dark brush. So starting with this nice little blue wash there. And then let's go into our green. There we go. I've actually got some green here too. And create a couple little stems. I want to do the green while that's wet so it kind of blends into there. But doesn't this give you the feeling of kind of a white flower? For me, it does. And then let's do a couple leaves, which I'll use a very light wash. Point, press and open up my brush. And I'm using the tip of my brush just to kind of color in those. But what I'll do while that's wet is grab some of the darker green and tap in at the base, just like that. And there you go. Now, I'm going to go on to, let's do these little. So everything I'm painting is rather light and washy, very subtle. Point, press, and open up that, and then back up to the point. So everything's very light and washy because I'm going to, again, I'm going to work with some layers. So just tapping in a little darker green there. And then let's go on to this one, just laying down some of that blue and purpley color. Where is that color? What did I do with that? Oh, right here. And actually, I could even go into this probably now. Let me get some blue. Add some blue to my purple. Let me zoom up a bit so you can see my palette. There we go. So I'm mixing a little blue with that purple I had on my palette and just go in kind of with the side of my brush and just creating some darker values. But next what I'll do is wash my brush off and go right beside that, wash my brush off again, because I want to just soften that edge. So there you go, it's kind of blurry, and I'm gonna even leave these three just like they are. And we'll come back to that. Let's keep going to our next daisy here. So for that daisy, I used a little bit, I think, of that burned sienna. This color here, tapping, because I don't want too much. And point press, and then using a little bit of that tip. I don't want to completely paint the leaf there. And then let's go into the middle with some of that yellow. There we go. And just with a damp brush, letting that blend in with some of that yellow. There you go. And I could even pick some of that up, but I think I'll just leave it as it is. And let's go on to this. I don't even know what these are. I think I kind of made them up, to be quite honest, guys. I do that a lot of times. So I'm kind of doing these little dabs, point, and then press and lift. Press and lift. And I'll add in some of our blue to my purple. I kind of wanted a little different blue. Let's see, let's try this one. Wanted a little deeper purpley blue. And that's probably a medium value, so I want to add a little water. Because again, I'm working in layers, so I'm building up those colors. And while this is wet, I'm going to go in with that green, so we get a tiny bit of spread there. Pick up some of my green before that dries, but working with my lightest value. And look how beautiful. Love how those blend. Can draw some of these little stems. This brush is perfect for that. So look how subtle and nice that is. Okay, let's do, oops, wrong one. Now I'm starting to work in some layers. So I'm building up those colors by using a medium value now, and point, press. Some are lighter, I'm not going to do them all. And even these back ones I'll do darker, so leave some space for those. So this was a very pale value, probably 80% water, 20 pigment. And now this one is a little bit darker. And even if it wasn't totally darker, just because you're layering, it's going to be a little darker. And then let's do this little flower in the background here. There we go. I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow to that. There we go. Pick up a little bit more of that yellow. and making this your lightest value. I've gotten a little bit darker here than I might have wanted, but that's all right. Not going to worry about that. So I lifted up a bit just to lighten that a tiny amount. Okay, do it again. And then we'll go in and let's create that center with a wash of yellow. Now that was also a little darker. Might go in here, and there's another layer. Look how pretty that is when you layer those things. So I've used a darker value. And the same is going to go for those back petals, but we'll get to that in a minute. I want to add a little bit of the burnt sienna in there. Let me pick up some of that brown and just tap in. There we go. Now, if you don't like something, you can always wash and rinse your brush, make it thirsty, and just pick some of that up. Nothing to worry about. So let's go ahead and do our little purple flowers here. Pick up some of that purple. These are the lightest value first. And that will dry. And I had an interesting question in class, which I loved, because sometimes I don't think of all these things because I do this so much. And she was asking about if when I work with the different values, if I keep them all separate in my palette. And I do somewhat. So I have a little, I might use a palette like this, and I might have my darkest value out here, and as I get to the center, it's lighter. That way you have all three to choose from. And of course, always building from the darkest. So I'm just gonna go in and do some little swishes, maybe some blue. So we just keep building and building those layers. There we go. Wash, rinse my brush and just soften that line. There you go. Look how cute that is. Okay, a couple more of those right here. Let me grab a little bit more purple, but keeping that, I'm just barely touching the tip of my brush in there. Then tap it off. Point press. I'm just really kind of dabbing these on here. And then I'll go into the blue, which is kind of a turquoisey, but when I mix it with that purple, it does turn blue. And let that kind of mix in. So just continuing to build layers. And then let me get the green. I don't usually paint this small either, guys, so this is kind of a practice for me. I'm touching in while this is wet, just like that, because I want it to spread into that little flower. There we go. Look how cute and dainty this is. This definitely isn't my normal style of painting. Okay, we've got another little daisy here, so let me grab some of that color that I already had pre-mixed here, tap it off on the side, and just going in and really using the side of my brush, pick up some of that yellow for the middle. There we go. Wash and rinse my brush. I'm going to go to these little purple goodies here on the side. And point press, point press, point press, point press, point press. So just repeating that. And if you have too much, just wipe off your brush and soak it up. And then the green, grabbing some of that green here. But I'm tapping that off too. Look at all that liquid that comes off. There we go. Now I'm going to go into that. That was my lightest value, but let's go in with a little bit of blue and a little bit of that purple just to create, ooh, I'm getting too much. You just need so little. Tap, tap, tap. And just create some darker values. Now this one, I won't do a lot of darker values because maybe that one's in the background. And I'm gonna go one more dark layer with these. Going to the center of this flower, I'm gonna grab some of that brown. Let's see, we'll put it right here. Tap, 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 gets that excess water off of there. And just dab in. So I've still got a little more water than I want. So look at all that water that comes off. That's a lot. If that went on your paper, it would just flow everywhere. It's even a little too much still there. So did you see all that came off? So create a thirsty brush and just pick it back up. Now I might go in there because I want it a little bit darker. There we go. And I'm going to do the same with these. I'm going to go in with just a little bit darker brown for the middle because that's what I want to do on all of these. So we just have a couple stems and leaves, one more of these little purple guys. So light value, like that. Go in with our green for that stem, tap, tap, tap. There we go, here's a leaf. So I am pushing into my brush, point, press, and then up on the point again. Get some of those fun little leaves in there. So that was a little darker value, which I don't really want to do yet because I want to get all of my first value down. I'm going to go in that with some of that blue. Add that in, not every single leaf, just a few. And now let's just draw in all of our little stems. So I'm going to use this green. And the tip of my brush resting my hand on my paper. And barely any pressure. This is where practicing those brush strokes is so important so that you know how to create a very thin line. Okay, so we've got a lot of lighter values. Now what I'm going to go in and do is create some darker values since it's dry and show you how they pop out. So let's pick up that yellow. Using the side of my brush, I'm loading it. And now I'm going to go in and just kind of glaze over. Oop, I've got a little hair. I feel like I want a little bit more water on my brush. So just added a little bit more water to that. And then here we go again. Tap, tap, tap. And point, press. I'm going to paint the ones in the back a little bit darker. Point, press, point, press. So look how interesting that is, you guys. This is what I love, love, love. I talk about all the time. Oh, and you know what? Actually, originally I was making these white, wasn't I? Well, so much for that. So look how fun that is when you add in all these different values. And then I'm going to go into these and let's pick up a little blue. Just my ultramarine here. And let's go in and paint some of these. Look how interesting that is when you add these values, you guys. It's like all of a sudden these things just pop right out, don't they? Grab a little bit more of that. I don't use ultramarine a whole lot, but it is a very pretty color. So I'm just using the tip of my brush for some little details. Now, as you know, I don't work in detail stuff a whole lot, but I think sometimes it can be quite fun, and that's popping out all of these. There we go. Really lifts them out. Now I'm going to go into the center of this one, and then we'll go into some of these leaves. I really wanted to show you just such an easy way for a beginner to really level up their paintings is just playing with those values. So I'm going to go in here and just wet that center a tiny bit, and then pick up some of my darker brown, wetting the side of my brush. Way too dark. Oops. There we go. But I'm not going straight to my paper with that. I need to tap that off. Look at all that liquid that came off. You don't want to go into your paper with that. And then, especially because this is wet. If I was going in wet on dry, wouldn't be a problem. There you go. And I'm going to do the same thing with these. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the value on this little leaf right here. And I'm kind of picking and choosing. So I'm going to go with probably 80% pigment, 20% water, but I'm still tapping off. And then let's darken some of these. I feel like I'm going to darken this one. Point press. Point press. Just adding this interest. Point press. There we go. And maybe adding in some darker stems. Like this, just here and there. So you're really pushing and pulling these elements in front and behind. And look how cute that is. Now I could even go in one darker. So I have a darker yellow here. I wanted zigzag because that's so interesting. Like here I've got dark, dark. Now I'm coming down here. Now on these, I'm going to go this way and darken this little flower. I like to work kind of in triangles or zigzaggies. I just think it's a lot more interesting. Oh, now that one I just added some, I had some yellow in my palette. That's fine. So let's go in. I actually want it to be a little bit yellower. Okay. Point press, a little bit yellower even. Be careful with that cad yellow though, it can be a little bit bright. Point press, a little bit more yellow. Oh, here, I'm going to use this yellow here. Oop, stuck my finger in there. Okay, and you can use any ceramic little palette for this. Okay, so point press, just varying these point press, pulling some of these out, maybe even this one here that's on top. Point press, just glazing over. Now you don't want to work these too much because you can reactivate the bottom layer and then it's just going to turn into a big puddly mess. So a little bit more of that yellow. Point press, point press, point press. There we go. Just pulling along. And now I'll go into the center and add in that brown again. Not too much on my brush. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. There we go. So now I've got this line up here that goes over here, and now we want to bring it over in this area. Now I'm not really liking how much that spreads, so I just take a nice, barely damp brush and go in and kind of lift some of that out. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to darken this a little bit because I want the darks to go this way and then back this way. So let's grab some of that purple in a darker value, just meaning more pigment in my paint. Maybe some more of that blue. And if I was to go full strength on any of these, it would really pop out. Point press, look at that. That really pops out. I think I'll leave that one light, and I think that's all I'm going to do with that. There we go. Oop, kind of left that one hanging, didn't I? Just adding in this is my last layer. I don't like to go more than 3 layers, guys. I think I might add another little leaf over here, just to guide my eye, a darker value rather. So there we go, there's a darker value. And let's just create a little leaf here. Let's see, where do I want to put it? I think what I want to do is put it kind of, let me think about this. Maybe got this going here. I want to come back over here. So point, wiggle, wiggle. There we go. Point, wiggle, wiggle, like that. And that kind of leads my eye. While that's kind of wet still, I'm going to go in with that dark value. And I think this is good. I think I'm pretty much done with this. So I hope that showed you a little bit of values. I could still even add in, let's grab a really dark brown. A couple little dots in here. And even a couple dots in here. Just using the very tip of my brush. Because I want these to kind of be like a pathway through the painting. That's really interesting for the viewer. It's like your eye is just naturally led around like that. And then I'm just going to join that a little bit. There we go. So I think I like that. I think that's good. And I think it's got some really great flow in here. We could actually, if you really wanted to play, you could pick up a very light version of these blues or even the yellows. And let's see, tap, tap, tap. And add a few in the background here. Let's see, maybe right here. So they're just barely in the background. Look at how much interest that is. Just a hint of those. You could do that with the yellow as well. A very, very pale version of that yellow. So, I mean, this is so subtle. This is probably 90% water, 10% pigment. Tap, tap, tap. Look at how dark that still is though. So very little. And let's just add a little flower in the background here. Just to give a hint that there's something back there. maybe right here. And you don't have to get real specific, just little hints of these flowers. It's so subtle. But it's really interesting for the eye because for my eye anyway, because it makes you think, ooh, what's back there? I want to see that. So anyways, I'm going to stop there. I hope this was kind of fun for you in painting these little, let me pan up a little, these little wildflowers and just showing you values. It's one of my favorite techniques. And I hope you give it a try. All right, everybody, have fun. Bye.